Greetings, everybody. I am Young Penitent, and welcome to my Icon Corner. Tonight, we have a special guest. I am going to be interviewing John Connolly, and he is a similar. He's a YouTuber. He's got his own YouTube channel called True Strength, and he happens to share the same diagnosis as me, which we will talk about as we get into the interview. So be sure to remember to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you would like to be notified when I go live so you can catch the live stream and be part of the conversation, then hit the bell button. And with that, I will add him to the stage. Welcome, John.
How's it going, man?
Good. How are you? How are you tonight?
I'm doing good, man.
Okay. Good. Christ is risen.
Truly, he is risen.
Yeah, I woke up this morning and my voice was about an octave lower.
Oh yeah, I've been pretty sick the past couple of weeks myself.
Have you?
Yeah,
What have you got?
I don't know. I don't know if it's just like a common cold, but it's I've just been coughing up a lot, and my
Right.
voice has also kind of been giving me trouble.
Yeah. So I think I just this happens to me every year. I'm in the Willamette Valley, which is the grass seed capital of the world. That's our main agricultural export here, and I happen to have hay fever. So they grow grass seed, which is used for lawns and golf courses and things like that. But it's really miserable for a couple months here, but we'll get through it in any case. So I was sharing in the introduction, sharing with the audience that you have the same diagnosis as me, which is schizoaffective disorder.
Yes.
Well, first of all, before we get into that, why don't you just give us a brief introduction of who you are, maybe what your YouTube channel is about, however you would like to introduce yourself.
All right. So my name's John. I'm an American Orthodox Christian, and I'm currently in the U.S. military, and I'm stationed in Japan. And I actually converted to Orthodoxy here in Japan, and that was quite an interesting journey because Christianity is just not very popular in Japan, and Orthodoxy is even a much smaller percentage of the Christians that do exist here. So I ended up discovering Orthodoxy because I got diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder, which is a type of it's a combination of schizophrenia and depression or bipolar symptoms, depending on which type you have. So basically, when my illness first started, I just typical of schizophrenia, you're psychotic, you're paranoid, you feel like you're losing control of your brain, and I honestly got extremely suicidal during this time because I was psychotic. I didn't see any hope. And I realized that I needed to find God. I'd grown up as a Protestant Christian, attending just random different churches with my family, but I never really understood much about Christianity, and I think a lot of that was because of the types of churches that I was going to. Now that I've studied a lot of Christian history and theology, I understand that the Protestant traditions kind of just over time they just lost more and more of the faith. So all I really remember, even though I went to church for years as a child, all I remember was that Jesus died for my sins and have faith in him. And there was never anything other than that. They would have like kids, I think it was like Sunday school where we would read stories from the Bible, but obviously I was young at the time, but I never understood like what that meant, how I was supposed to implement it into my life. And as I said, I think because the Protestant traditions don't have the fullness of faith that we have in the Orthodox Church, I think that is why so many people are abandoning and falling away from Christianity in our modern times. And that is exactly what happened to me. And really when I first got diagnosed with schizophrenia, or even before I was diagnosed, because when my illness first started, I didn't receive a proper diagnosis for over a year. So I was going to mental health clinics, to the emergency room, and they were diagnosing me with everything except what I actually had. They diagnosed me with anxiety disorder, with depression. Eventually, they diagnosed me with a brief psychotic disorder, which is sort of like it's like schizophrenia, but for a shorter period of time. Basically, it's
Mm.
like you get psychotic, and then a lot of times people can recover from it. But I was uh, I was experiencing my symptoms. I knew exactly what was happening to me, and I knew it was schizophrenia basically from the day that it started because schizophrenia runs in my family,
Mm.
and it was like one moment I was fine, something snapped. The next moment I was like, oh my god, I'm losing control of myself. Like my brain is like it was literally like psychotic paranoia and delusional thoughts, and just like I could understand like I am losing connection with reality. And I was explaining that to the mental health practitioners, and they were still saying like, oh, it sounds like you have anxiety or like maybe depression. And I was like, I think this is schizophrenia. I need antipsychotic medication. And they weren't giving me antipsychotic medication because they didn't understand that I had a psychotic disorder. So I was on antidepressants for quite a while. And as you know, with schizophrenia, antidepressants will not treat schizophrenia. It's the wrong medication. So I was
Mm.
going through all of this. I was experiencing schizophrenia. I was getting the wrong medication, the wrong diagnosis. So I was getting no help at all. So I was just forced to live with this. And during that time, I realized I needed God. And I realized whatever I had been doing in my spiritual life leading up to this point was not working, because basically I fell away from the faith in my later teens, early 20s. And I just realized like, okay, now I'm in a state of despair. Basically, like I don't know what to do. I'm suicidal. And
Mm.
a good friend of mine recommended that I look into church history, and specifically the Orthodox Church. So I kind of started studying during this time, and really I looked into Catholicism a little bit, but I felt that it was kind of obvious that Catholicism, like the Protestants, have lost a lot of the ancient tradition over time, and they've changed a lot of things. So really there wasn't much like debate going on between like the different denominations or whatever. I was pretty set on orthodoxy from the very beginning. But like I said, it was just it was such a hard time for me because orthodoxy is just not very accessible here in Japan.
Mm.
So I started visiting the Japanese Orthodox Church, but the whole liturgy is in Japanese. The priest doesn't really speak English at the church that I went to, so I was still kind of lost.
Right.
And basically, what ended up happening was I thought there was no hope for me to convert in Japan. I would have to wait until I moved back to the U.S., and then hopefully I could get baptized one day. So I basically just accepted that and started reading a lot of books and watching a lot of online content from Orthodox sources. And one day I was on the Orthodox Ethos live stream that they do. And there was a question and answer session. And I asked Father Peter how I should practice Orthodoxy while living in Japan. And he recommended that I go to the Romanian church in Tokyo because the priest there actually speaks English. So it's about 6 hours from my military base to that church in Tokyo. So it's a long journey, but I ended up trying to go there as regularly as possible. And eventually I started being catechized, and I was baptized in January of last year.
Okay. And when did you decide to make a YouTube channel? And what is the focus?
Um, Honestly, I've kind of always had this sort of passion of trying to be like an entrepreneur, and I've actually had like multiple YouTube channels in the past, like growing up throughout my teenage years. And a lot of it was focused on like health, nutrition, and strength training, because I've always had a passion for that as well. And in the
Okay.
past, I was actually a certified personal trainer, and I do hold a certified nutrition coaching certification.
Okay.
So that's just something that has always been my passion. And in the past, I had kind of like dabbled around with it, but I never took it too seriously. And then, once my schizophrenia first started, I basically I just abandoned all hope of that, because I was struggling so much with the symptoms of my illness that I'm sure you can relate to this with the combination of schizophrenia symptoms and the side effects of the medication. It can really just like shut your brain down. and it was hard for me to think clearly. Like I didn't have like this creative sort of like drive in me. I was just kind of in like survival mode. Like
Oh.
it was just very hard for over a year until I started discovering the other treatment methods like the ketogenic diet. And once I started finding other treatment methods besides just the medication, which honestly wasn't working too well for me,
Hmm.
I pretty much got myself into remission for the first time, where I almost just started feeling like a normal human again, you know. And once that happened, I just sort of naturally started becoming more creative again. I feel like I kind of got my personality back, and that led me to want to create a YouTube channel focused on really sharing my story of fighting against mental illness. And really, I want to target it to a Christian audience because we obviously would share the same worldview and just kind of understand what it is we're dealing with. That there is a spiritual aspect to this, not just a physical and chemical aspect, you know?
Hmm.
So I'm honestly still trying to figure out the exact direction that I want to go with my channel because, like I said, I have experience with like strength training, nutrition coaching, and now obviously dealing with a mental illness. So I'm trying to figure out how all these things can really go together and how I can offer something beneficial for my
Sure.
viewers, you know?
Well, I think if you just keep, just keep making videos, and it'll eventually over time you'll just find your niche. And part of my, I think we have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm.
Besides being Orthodox Christians, you said you're into lifting. I've been a power lifter, or I'm a lifter. I have
Right.
done some powerlifting. I'm into nutrition. Has been an interest of mine since I was in college. And I
Oh, wow.
remember, yeah, I remember when I was like my first red pill about nutrition was when I was at the University of Oregon, and I was at baseball practice because I was in on the club baseball team, and I was talking to one of my co teammates, and he said, don't go to, I don't eat at McDonald's. I said, what? I didn't know anything about good quality food or anything. He said, no, no, you don't eat that
Right.
junk. That's like processed, factory farmed, whatever. It's full of
Right.
chemicals. And I was like blown away when he said that. I said, what? You don't eat what's wrong with McDonald's? And that was like the beginning of my journey, which was a long arc. I thought at first that, well, at the University of Oregon, there's a lot of vegetarian and vegan kind of propaganda. So at
Mm-hmm.
that time, I thought that was the way. And
Right.
but I did, over time, I read a lot about nutrition, and I came to the conclusion at the end of my journey, which I think by now I'm like I've kind of I'm like at the end, like I've learned enough that basically I can when it comes to nutrition, I boiled it down to it's more important what you don't eat than what you do. I think you want
Right.
to
Right.
avoid chemicals and junk and food and whatever. But my nutritional arc has gone from being you know vegetarian slash vegan. Now I'm a carnivore keto.
Right. Me
Which is
too.
the
Me
whole
too.
opposite end, which is what we're gonna get. We'll get into that,
Oh,
tonight.
definitely.
One of the treatments for our diagnosis, but we have the same diagnosis. We're both Orthodox lifters, nutrition. So,
Right.
and I watched a couple of your videos, and I think you're a very eloquent person.
Oh,
Which
thank you.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of maybe that's why you're making a YouTube channel. You can speak. You have a facility with language. So I think we have a lot in common. I look at you. How old are you?
24.
So 24. I'm like 43, and so
Okay.
I look at you as you're like basically me, like 20 years when I
Yeah.
first got diagnosed. So I thought
Right.
it
Right.
would be a good thing to have a conversation. Just you can tell me what you think. I can tell you what I have learned over the years. And see what comes of it. And the people watching, I want this channel to be for, there's going to be Orthodox Christians out there with mental illnesses, and
Yes.
they'll be say, hey, have you heard of Young Penitent's channel? He has schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
And people will maybe feel comfortable coming to my channel and watching the videos, learning about well, like what we're talking about tonight, which is strategies that we've learned over our time and with our experience
Right.
for how to deal with mental illness. Um, my next question for you is: so, did you have any mental illness growing up, or did it just kind of hit like when you were in your early 20s? Did you have? Because I had depression growing up that was really
Hmm.
terrible, like a very oppressive kind of depression for many years. Did you
Yeah,
have?
that's something I've been thinking about more lately because I think I was experiencing a lot of mental illness growing up, and I don't think that I was aware of it
Hmm.
for whatever reason. I think it's pretty common for mental illness to start in the teenage years. And really what happened to me was I was always like doing well in school. I always got good grades and everything. I would say I was just like a pretty average kid growing up, And then around the freshman year of high school, maybe a little earlier than that, maybe towards the end of middle school, something happened to me and I started skipping school. I started like sleeping in the mornings, and it was a real struggle for me to like get up. And I didn't realize it at the time for whatever reason, probably because I was just young and stupid. But now looking back, it sounds like that was like the typical sort of like depression, what you would classify as depression. And yeah, I went from being a normal student, getting good grades, I went to like failing all of my classes. And I remember in freshman year of high school, they gave us like our it was like our report cards or whatever for the quarter, the semester, and it said on there like your number out of every student in the school, and like the highest number was the best and the lowest number was the worst. And my number was 17. So there was only 16 kids in the entire school that were worse than I was. And I literally like, looking back now, when I saw that, like I didn't even care about it. I was just like, oh, whatever. Like I was just so lost in thinking that like it was all just meaningless. I was just, just depressed basically. And like I said earlier, I think a lot of that was because I fell away from Christianity as I grew up. And I do think a lot of that was because I never had exposure to real Christianity. But I think that even if I was experiencing like a legitimate mental illness during that time of my life, I think being in the church would have really helped me to start to understand how to overcome a lot of that.
Mm, right. Yeah. I mean, I think from my own experience, I think that the church has helped me in terms of overcoming depression. Like I had
Mm,
I didn't see the point in life. I was like, why? What's the point? I had no structure to understand life, but the church gives people purpose. You
right.
definitely have a purpose. You have something that you're trying to accomplish here. And,
Yes.
so that the life of the church actually did help me overcome depression, which no drug was able to do.
Right. Right.
And it, I think like maybe that just terrible depression that I suffered for so many years that kept getting worse and worse and worse. That
Hmm.
like broke my brain. That's why I like eventually went into psychosis. Because it was
Right.
such a terrible pain unaddressed. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't seek treatment. I didn't want. I knew maybe some other people were depressed and they were taking medication, but unlike you, who sought out treatment, I always was resistant to treatment. I didn't want to take medication
Right.
for some reason. I don't know where that idea comes from. Where does that idea come from? Because some people are like that.
Honestly, I've had a difficult sort of relationship with medication because I will say that the medication, when it works, it does alleviate a lot of the symptoms, but it comes with so many side effects that I
Mm,
feel like it can sometimes cause just as many problems as it's trying to treat. And that's kind of what ultimately led me to try to start the ketogenic diet and to reduce my medication because honestly, I'd been on like 4 or 5 different antipsychotic medications, and it never completely healed my paranoia and my delusions.
mm,
So I still felt psychotic most of the time, but it might have just been to a lesser extent. But at the same time, they kept increasing the dosage until it got to the point that I was just like literally a zombie. Like my brain was like completely shut down. my memory was completely gone. I was falling asleep in the middle of the day. Like I could not stay awake. And looking back at all that I've been through, I feel like it would have been more beneficial to take a more holistic approach from the very start.
Hmm.
And I think a lot of this is that the medical industry and the mental health treatment, they're not really aware that there are other treatment methods out there that, in my experience, work far better than medication. I'm not saying there's no point for medication. And I have to add that every single person will respond differently to medication based on their personal body chemistry. But for me, I was on so many different meds, going from the lowest dose to the highest dose possible, and nothing actually got rid of my symptoms. And I think I had gotten to a point that I accepted this is just going to be my life. I'm just going to just struggle and never have my sanity back until I discovered the ketogenic diet.
Really?
So from talking to you in the past, it sounds like you got pretty stable on Seroquel.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
for me,
my doctor said I'm a medication hyper responder. So I
oh
respond
wow.
yeah, I respond really well to most, just the most medications. Some medications.
I think I'm the exact opposite, to be honest, because I tried so many antipsychotic medications, and I honestly, looking back, I think it might have slightly reduced my schizophrenia symptoms, but it was hardly noticeable. And then with the horrible side effects, it almost made things worse, to be honest. So I was really losing hope for a while, and I thankfully had started to accept, and I started to get over the sort of suicidal thoughts. But I did kind of I took like a defeated mentality that this is just going to be my life. There is no hope. I'm going to have symptoms. I'm going to have medication, and it's just going to be a struggle for however long I'm alive.
Huh. Where are you now? I mean, I know you were trying to. I can't remember where you were last time. Where are you now with your medication? Do you mind if you don't mind asking? Or
Yeah, so I tried Seroquel for a while, because you actually said that it was working well for you, and I wanted to give it a try just to see, because that was one that I hadn't tried yet. Um, I was taking it at a lower dose, and I mentioned this to you, but apparently the lower doses can actually be more sedating than the higher doses for some reason. I don't really understand the science, but for whatever reason, I started at a low dose, and I was doing the ketogenic diet at the same time. So I honestly think most of my healing was from the diet rather than the medication. So
okay.
my depression, my paranoia, it was all significantly reduced, but I was experiencing a lot of sedation from the medication. So I ended up switching back to olanzapine, because in the past, when I was the most stable, what I was doing was taking olanzapine and following the keto
Right.
or carnivore diet.
Okay.
So I just went back to what worked in the past, to be honest. And the past few weeks, I've been feeling more stable than I have
Okay.
in a long time.
Good. So you found something that's working for you right now.
Yes.
That's good. I'm going to address a few comments. Matthew Johnson, who's been very uh, generous with my channel as of late, sends 4.99, and I thank you for that. And he says, "Christos anesti, alitos anesti. I have been off two meds for depression for 2 months now. Glory to God. It is glorious to truly feel again."
Amen.
I wonder if Matthew is using keto or some other sort of treatment modality, because keto is useful for more than just schizophrenia. I mean, it's helpful for a
Right.
lot of different illnesses. Um, Tim Miller has a poking fun. He says, "Don't take medication religiously." LOL. He knows we're a religious channel here. So that's funny. He said, I think up earlier, he said he's a disabled vet. So I'm sure he has an interesting story
Oh,
himself.
definitely.
So, and I understand you've had some struggles with. So when you sign up, how does it work? You sign up for the military. You sign up for what, like 4 years, or what did you sign up for?
So I did a 4-year contract, and my contract is basically over now, but because of my diagnosis, I'm going through like a medical retirement. So they're basically honestly, I just found out that I should be out of here hopefully within the next month. But this has been a multiple year process of trying to get all the basically when you get discharged, you have to get like a disability percentage based on whatever illness or disability you have. And it's the military is just it's a big corporation. It takes a long time for them to do anything.
Huh.
So it's just I've just been waiting on my discharge process basically. And the weird thing is that when you have a severe mental illness, you're technically not qualified to be in the military.
Hmm.
So I'm technically like medically disqualified. Like I cannot perform legally, medically any job in the military. But at the same time, I also legally have to stay in until the discharge is fully complete. So it's kind of like I'm in this weird gray area where I'm forced to be in the military, even though I'm not really allowed to be in the military.
Yeah.
And it's also been difficult because honestly, I'm still active duty, so I don't know how much I can like legally say while I'm still under contract.
Oh,
But it has been it's been a difficult process because I'm at a pretty small base here in Japan, and there isn't a lot of access to like full mental health treatment. So I guess I can say this. In 2023, they sent me to a treatment facility in the U.S. and I was in treatment for like 4 months, and it was like inpatient treatment where you literally live at the hospital and you go to therapy all day and they adjust your meds. Excuse me. And that treatment center was actually specifically for active duty military.
hmm.
So the problem that I had was that nobody else there. I think there was like one other person that had schizophrenia, because typically if you have schizophrenia, you're not going to be in the military. So the people that I was interacting with, the other patients there, they were struggling with other mental issues like depression, anxiety, PTSD. But for me, I was kind of like the odd guy there that actually had a schizophrenic psychotic disorder, So the treatment wasn't necessarily geared towards me. And also throughout my experience of like psychology and therapy and everything, like experiencing the treatment, I've found more healing in Christianity than I ever found in like secular therapy.
Hmm. How so? Like how did that?
Um, honestly, as Orthodox Christians, we believe that Orthodox Christianity is the truth of the reality that we live in. It is theologically accurate. It explains this life that we live, and when you're divorced from the faith, you don't have the proper understanding. And what I've come to understand is that a lot of these mental issues, sometimes they can be caused by legitimate brain disorders, and sometimes they can be caused by spiritual reasons.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think there's also this gray area where both things can be happening at the same time. It's not like if you have a legitimate brain disorder, that doesn't mean that you don't need a spiritual life. You need both. You need to treat both of these things at the same time. And understanding, just through reading a lot the past few years, that a lot of these thoughts, especially like suicidal ideations, are they're demonic. They're not from God. It's
Hmm.
God does not want us to kill ourselves. God wants to save us. So it would be completely counterintuitive. That being said, it seems that God allows things to happen to us. He allows demons to tempt us so that we can make spiritual progress. And starting to understand that, it changed my whole worldview, because I'd never been exposed to this understanding. I never really growing up, I never had any meaning or purpose in my life. And then I'm exposed to the church, which actually, in the most basic terms, I think you can just say Christianity explains life and reality as it really is.
Hmm.
And that's something that, because secular psychology and therapy, they're not Christian, they don't understand the spiritual component to all of this. They can't provide healing for your soul. And
Right.
that's the most important thing in my experience, because you said that being in the church almost completely got rid of your depression. For me, I can say that it has helped a lot, but there are still times when I go into episodes and I do get depressed and I have suicidal thoughts.
Hmm.
So for me, obviously I'm a sinner. I fail to live as I should. But even when I feel like I'm doing a decent job, when I'm following my priest and my prayer rule and everything, there are still times when I feel like it's not necessarily coming from a completely spiritual reason. It is coming more from an actual like brain disorder, you know.
Sure, sure.
So trying to treat both of those at the same time and seeing how they connect with each other, it's been an interesting journey. And I really feel that without the understanding that I've gained in the church, that I would have fallen into like the deepest despair and possibly committed suicide, to be honest, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, my case isn't necessarily, I wouldn't say that what happened to me would necessarily happen to everybody else, that their depression will go away, but maybe
Right.
some people it will. That was just my story. So, and I tell that story over and over, you know, when I address this issue. There's a question from Matthew. He asks, "Are you a member of the St. Paisios Brotherhood? Your story is super familiar."
Oh, yes, I am. I don't remember sharing my story too in depth over there, but I might have mentioned it sometime before. But I do join some of those the groups and the video sessions every once in a while.
Okay, yeah, interesting. I might want to do a stream about that brotherhood sometime. Maybe you can help hook me up with someone to get that scheduled. But yeah, and another thing I wanted to say about what you were, another comment, you were saying some of these symptoms and illnesses have spiritual components, and some of them are biological.
Right.
And there's a story I remember. I don't know if this is written down anywhere, or it might have just been like one of the stories that people pass around that I heard. But Saint John, this of Shanghai and San Francisco, is that your patron saint or?
No, mine's Saint John the Baptist.
Baptist. Oh, good one.
Mhm.
Anyhow, there's a story about him, and they said they would bring patients to him, or they would ask him, because he had discernment, spiritual discernment,
Right.
and they would ask him and say, you know, they would bring a person who was ill and say, you know, is this person possessed? Does this person need medication? Does this person need to address their spiritual problem? You know, and he could tell the difference. He said, yeah, that person needs to go take medicine and be at the hospital,
Mhm.
and that person, you know, needs an exorcism or whatever it might have been.
Right.
You know, but we don't have a lot of people like that around these days, and if they are, you probably haven't heard of them. You don't know, you know, because they probably live in seclusion somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Those, you know, these saints, they tend to like to sequester themselves away from the world.
Yes.
Um, and another thing I wanted to say was, you know, life without Jesus Christ in your life, without being in the church, without being baptized, having this true life, like well, just from my own experience, I remember like my years in college when I was searching for the truth, when I was searching for the church, and I was on this spiritual quest. It was just a long, dark night. Like there's just
Right.
you're in darkness. You don't know what's going on. You know, and when you're born into the church, you're you're in life. You're in Christ,
Yes.
and I mean, like that suffering of being of not having God, like you know, that suffering just ended for me. So that was just my experience. Not I don't know if that's going to be everyone else's experience, but you should
Right.
definitely find out. I highly recommend, if you're not in the church, that should be your first priority. Personally, you should try it. You want to get baptized, go become Orthodox, and that should be your first. If you're not Orthodox right now, that should be your first priority in life.
Absolutely.
Um, Another super chat. Thank you
Fine.
from Matthew Johnson, and he says, "I suggested contacting Representative Crenshaw for help with the military
Oh,
psychology,
yes, I do remember that. Okay.
cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT), which is the Jesus prayer."
I,
Um,
I don't know if CBT is a Jesus prayer, to be honest. It's two very different things in my opinion. You know, the Jesus prayer is a spiritual practice, and cognitive behavioral therapy is more of a mental approach to life. But
mm,
there might be some similarities. Maybe I honestly I'm not super educated on CBT, but like I said earlier, secular psychology and therapy is completely separated from any spiritual component. You know, there I think I read before that therapists are not even legally allowed to talk about religion. So there is no spiritual component to this treatment at all. So like I said, it can be beneficial for treating like purely mental, physical, neurological, I guess, illnesses, but there's absolutely no treatment for your soul, for spiritual practices and gaining a relationship with God, which, as Young Penitent just said, if you're struggling with something, even if you're not struggling with something, your first goal should be to embrace the faith, join the church, and start living the Christian life. And after you do that, you have to put the foundation first. Once you have that set up, then I think it's much easier to interact with these other components and embrace therapy or cognitive behavioral therapy or whatever in certain circumstances where they might be necessary.
Tim Miller sends a $20 super chat. Thank you, Tim. There is no comment. Let's see. So you know something about nutrition.
Right.
You've been effectively, I guess, using the ketogenic therapy as
Yes.
this is kind of a new thing. I mean, I've known about this for a while, but I mean, it's sort of like a hot new buzz thing,
Right.
right now, this metabolic therapies. And so I'm actually thankful for that because actually recently, I don't know if I told you this, but I found a psychiatrist in my state who
Hmm.
does this is his specialty. And so he was willing to treat me, and I had my first meeting with him. And so I am actually now with a metabolic psychiatrist.
Right.
And
That's amazing.
yeah, and he might, my last psychiatrist, he was like, yeah, he didn't know anything. I asked him do you know what metabolic psychiatry is? And he says, oh, is that where you take multivitamins? He didn't know. He didn't even know what it was. He said he knew, but he didn't. Oops.
I've had the same experience. I mentioned it to my psychiatrist, and they had never heard of it before. They're like, "Oh wow, that's a thing."
So what is going on? How come the ketogenic diet helps with schizophrenia and other mental illnesses?
Honestly, from my understanding, like you said, this is still a very new area of research. And I don't think they've pinpointed the exact cause of exactly why it helps. I know there is a lot of research that it reduces inflammation, which can be a cause, or if not a cause, it can be a significant factor of mental illness. But there's actually I think you've heard of this guy, Dr. Chris Palmer.
Sure, sure.
Yeah, he wrote that book called Brain Energy, and he basically has this hypothesis that mental disorders actually are caused by gut microbiome deficiencies. And if that is the case, then you can say that if mental illness is caused by a nutritional issue, then it can be cured by a nutritional approach, right? Which would include sometimes supplementation and vitamins and everything. But what I've come to understand about the ketogenic diet is that it is actually a fasting mimicking diet. And what that means is that when a person fasts, they're not eating any food at all, right? If you do a dry fast, you can typically have water because there's no calories or nutrients in water. Sometimes people will even do fast with no water, no food at all. I honestly haven't studied like a black fast with no water, like super in depth. So I don't know the differences between that, but I would imagine that water would not make a difference because there's no calories in it, right? It's not going to make a big difference. But basically, what they've come to understand with the ketogenic diet is that a lot of the benefits that come from fasting is actually being in ketosis. And what ketosis is when your body switches from using carbohydrates to fat for fuel, right? So if you're not eating any food, you're obviously not eating any carbohydrates. So your body naturally goes into ketosis because it has no carbohydrates for fuel. It starts burning fat as energy. So what a ketogenic diet does is it mimics fasting, because on a ketogenic diet you're eating high fat, moderate to high protein, but you're basically doing low to no carbs. I honestly try to stay around zero carbs. And what that does is it mimics fasting because you're still not taking in carbohydrates for energy. So even though you're eating food, you're eating high fat food, low carb, no carb food. So your body is still using fat for energy. So it's staying in this ketosis, right? And basically what that is ketosis. You can achieve ketosis either by fasting and eating no food at all, or you can achieve ketosis by eating a high fat, no carb diet. It effectively does the same thing to your metabolism. So, like I said, we don't have like a conclusive answer of exactly why this is curing a lot of these illnesses, or if not curing it, it's significantly reducing the symptoms.
Right.
And I know there have been clinical trials, I think from like Harvard and Stanford, where they take people with severe mental illnesses, which would be the clinical term severe mental illness typically means a psychotic mental illness, which would be like bipolar disorder or schizophrenia or schizoaffective, which we have. And not that depression and anxiety aren't severe, but they're not classified in the clinical terms as a severe mental illness. So they took people that had bipolar and schizophrenia, they put them in a controlled study, they fed them ketogenic diets, and every single person was reducing their symptoms, and every single person was reducing their medication doses.
Wow.
And this is a huge breakthrough because, like I said earlier, the medications, they can help, but my case, for example, I didn't respond very well to the medications. It slightly reduced my symptoms, but at the same time, it turned me into a zombie, basically, And now that we're seeing that there are other forms of treatment and other things we can do besides just pumping people full of all these crazy chemicals that we honestly, we still don't understand the long-term effects of a lot of these medications, because especially the newer antipsychotics, I think they've only been around for maybe like 50 years or so. So we still don't know long-term what these things can do to your body and your brain, So it's very helpful to understand and to get this information out there that there are other treatments besides medication that many times actually work better, but it's just that they're not super well known yet.
Right. That's amazing. I mean, the fact, and it's also the fact that you can take your treatment into your own hands, like you do something.
Yes.
It takes a little effort. Like
Yes.
going to a ketogenic diet is such a drastic change. I needed
Absolutely.
It's so hard at first. Once you get into the rhythm of it, it's a little easier. It's still difficult
Hmm.
because there's no carbs. Like that's what you use. That's what like most people eat all day long. And it's
Yes.
such a comforting food. Like I just some white rice, with like
Right. Me too. Me too.
I want to go to like the Hawaiian place and have some white rice with some shoyu chicken or something like that, like.
Right.
But so you do have to deprive yourself. It takes a little bit of work. So this is for someone who's a little, I think, motivated, to kind of take
Definitely.
treatment into your own hands. So far, I've been about a year. I mean, I did it once before, but it wasn't really strictly. But let's say I've been doing this keto carnivore kind of ish thing for a
Hmm.
year. It's not strictly carnivore, but for the most part, and I can definitely say I well okay. First off, I'm more clear-headed,
Right. Me too. Me too.
and it's very noticeable. Like I kind of thought brain fog was a silly term, like oh I got brain fog. It kind of sounds silly, but it really is true. If I go back to eating some carbs, like that brain fog comes back like immediately.
Right.
And I
Right.
notice it now. So that itself is a motivator for me to stay on the diet. As well, I have been able to reduce my medicine by 10% over the last 6 months.
Oh, that's amazing.
And that's something I was never able to do before.
Right.
But I will say that part of the motivation for that, like I was starting to get like nervous, and everyone around me was getting nervous. Oh, he's reducing his medicine, and we don't want him because I don't know about you.
Hmm.
You maybe you. I don't. It didn't sound like this is what happened to you, but I become a maniac. if when my
Hmm.
illness becomes active, which is very you know, it's a very concerning to have a
Yes.
maniac running around, which is why they put us in locked psych wards when they can,
Yes.
and they drug us up. But so it remains to be seen if I will be able to reduce my medicine further. But this doctor's that I'm working with, he might be able to help me. And I'll be talking about it on my channel. I'm sure I'll bring you guys all along for the ride. And we'll
Right.
see if ketogenic therapy is able to, I mean, I don't know what is my life, like you said, the medication has these side effects where you're just kind of zonked out and you can't, I have
Right.
trouble reading. Like that's my worst. That's the thing that bothers me the most is it's hard to concentrate.
Right.
And
I definitely know that feeling.
like you were talking about the side effects of the medications, we do know that the medication will, it shrinks your brain. It's terrible.
Yes, I've seen that. Yes.
It's a horrible thing. So, well, I'm just, but I will say, I was going to also say that I started to get tardive dyskinesia, and that's
Right.
a powerful motivator for me to actually say, okay, I'm going to reduce a little bit more my medicine because I don't
Yes.
want this to progress. This is very annoying. This is bothering me, and I don't want to be going around making smacking my lips all day long. Uh,
No, it's it's horrible, man, because what I've reflected on through this whole experience is that there is all this new research coming out that people are doing keto and they're able to reduce their meds or even come off of medication completely. And it made me think, that God provided a lot of natural healing for us. It's like you get diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia and you go to the doctor and their first thing is to pump you full of a bunch of crazy medications. But God seems to have provided us natural healing. Like this is an oversimplification, but it's like go eat a steak and some eggs and try keto, and your symptoms can actually reduce in many cases more than these medications that they're giving you. And of course there are times when you're going to need both. You're going to need medication, but I feel it's a huge disservice from the medical industry that they don't know about this. And there is this research coming out, but for so long the treatments for mental illness, the entire history of it, even before the medications came out, I read a book. It's called Mad in America, and it was like the history of mental asylums in America,
mhm.
and the horrible treatments that they put people through. It's too many and it's too sad to list everything, but people are being abused and in many cases dying. And then they finally started, the pharmaceutical sort of revolution where the medications were coming out. But then even those, they have all these side effects. And it's like we look back at the history of everything that the mentally ill people have suffered with in the form of treatment that's not really effective treatment in many cases. And it's like, wow, the ketogenic diet, it's like stop eating carbs, eat some high fat food, eat some animal products. It's like God literally provided us with this amazing form of healing. And we've like abandoned that and fallen away from it into this sort of this sort of like scientific medication pushed institution.
Sure. And you know what's interesting? In the gospel, there was, I think, a child brought who was like I think they called him, what did they call him, an epileptic or something. He's thrown often into the fire and into the water. And I think Christ, if I'm remembering it correctly, Christ says this, why could not, and his disciples asked, why could not we heal him? And he said, this
Yes.
kind can go not out but by fasting and prayer. And you
Yes.
mentioned that the ketogenic diet is mimicking a fasting state.
Yes,
So,
exactly.
so this is half of the equation. We're fasting, basically. We're fasting on the ketogenic diet, and now the other half we have to add in by our own efforts, but we can add prayer. And I
Yes.
probably, I kind of gave up asking God to heal me. Maybe I should keep praying, but like I when I first became a Christian, I kept asking God, heal me of this, heal me of this.
Right.
And it never happened, so I kind of gave up. But you need to keep knocking, right? So maybe I
Right.
like need to keep up double my efforts, prayer, maybe it's not just asking for healing, but prayer in general. I don't know. Do you have any
No,
comment on
definitely. I've had the same experience of I asked God for healing a lot of the time. Then I started wondering and doubting myself, like maybe that's not God's will for me. Obviously I think everything happens by God's providence, and He gave me this illness for a reason. So what I've tried to ask is there's actually an Orthodox saint, Saint Dymphna, and she's the patron saint of the mentally ill. And I try to pray to her every day when I'm doing my prayer rule. And I pray directly to God and just say, like, your will be done with this, and I pray to Saint Dymphna and I say, please let God's will be fulfilled with this illness. And to me, that means if he wants to grant me more healing, then that is what he will do, and I will joyfully accept it. But another thing I've been reflecting on lately is, like, Orthodoxy teaches us a lot about suffering and of the positive aspects of suffering.
Sure.
And I've come to understand that it's important to, this is far easier said than done, but it's important to try to retain that joy and that love, even when we are in pain and suffering, so that's kind of why I got away from asking necessarily just to heal me, and just like, let your will be done. If it's going to
Right.
be a struggle, then I'll try to find joy and
Sure.
purpose through the pain and through the struggle.
Yeah.
And if you want to miraculously heal me, then glory to God.
Right. Well, that's a good thing. You're accepting God's will, and if
Trying.
it's God's will for you to, I mean, if God thought it was better for you to be healed, He would heal you. Maybe it's better for you to have this for right now. I
Right.
wouldn't, I wouldn't be here. I might not even be in the church if I didn't have this illness. Like
Me too.
I wouldn't. My life would be very different. I think it was the suffering and the illness itself that led me into the church ultimately. So
Me too.
maybe,
Me too.
maybe thank God. Yeah, so you told your story at the beginning, so maybe thank God for this. I mean,
Exactly.
so I guess it was a good thing ultimately. Here's a comment from Shovel. Interesting name. He says, "May I suggest a YouTube channel, Pottinger's Human? He explores metabolic treatments and fasting." Okay, I'll check it out. Have you heard of that?
I have not heard of that one, but I will look into it.
Okay. I mean, and if you see, oh, and this is kind of an interesting comment too. I use cannabis, have a card, don't promote it, but it helps my odd situation be a happy and more thankful one, brothers. So this is interesting because recently I've had several people suggest CBD, cannabis. I said, one person said this might help your TD, and but ask your priest, he said. And
Right.
I don't know, cannabis in general is just such a pernicious drug. My views of it have changed. Like I might have been over the years. Sometimes I'm more, sometimes I'm more, kind of liberal with it. It has some
Mhm.
uses, and and if it helps you, if it's got a medical aspect to it, then sure. Some other people come down and say, well, it's a sin. I don't know if it's necessarily a sin personally. That's just,
Right.
I don't think the church has made any pronouncements on that, but
I don't think so.
it, de-
I'm not too sure, to be honest.
it may depend on how you're using it. Do you have any thoughts on cannabis?
Um, yeah, honestly, I've never looked into it because with our specific diagnosis, I think if you're taking in THC specifically, I think CBD is safer, but THC it alters your brain, and marijuana use can induce psychotic episodes if you are prone to them. Most people, if they don't have the genetic I don't know if it'd be considered like a disorder, but the predisposition to inherit schizophrenia from a family member, basically, or even bipolar, it's far safer. But there are still times when you can have like a cannabis induced psychosis, which is like you'll take in cannabis and you go into basically a schizophrenic episode. But sometimes it can be for a very short period of time, and you can get the medication and it can just go away and never come back. But there is research showing that many people who have this experience, they have psychosis onset from marijuana use. In the future, they will go on to develop full blown schizophrenia.
Right. Yep.
And for that reason, I'm honestly pretty anti anti-cannabis because I've experienced schizophrenia, and I can say you do not want to have that experience if you can avoid it, you know.
I
And
mean,
I think it's probably oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, it's go ahead, continue.
No, I was going to say, I think it's probably relatively safe for the majority of people,
Sure.
but I do think there is this small sort of percentage of people that are more likely to develop a severe mental illness if they use it. And
Right.
for that reason, I just kind of just caution against it completely.
Yeah, and it's like I mean there was a video I watched recently, and they're saying that the strains that are so strong,
Mm,
it's like it's not really the drug that the hippies were smoking in
right.
back in the 60s 70s. Natural marijuana that hasn't been selectively bred has 3% THC, so you
Hmm.
might like get this nice kind of light feeling where like you had
Right.
a glass of wine or something, a little elevated. But today it's like 20-30%. Some and they have some other products. I don't know what all the new products are out, but since it's been legalized, there's also fancy ways to take it these days. So stay away from marijuana, kids. I mean, I did use it when I was in college quite. Uh, I mean, towards the end there, I was using it almost pretty much every day. So that I don't know if maybe I wouldn't have developed my schizophrenia, into psychosis if I wasn't using it. Absolutely,
Right.
that maybe was what maybe I'm just a very sensitive person, and that could have been case in. I mean, the doctor said no, it wasn't because of marijuana, but it could have helped contribute.
Definitely. Definitely.
Um, So let's see. So where are you now, um, in terms of, so you said you're getting discharged. Like, what is your life like there at
Um,
on the base?
Honestly, so they moved me to a very easy duty because, like I said, I'm basically like disqualified from the military. So they moved me to like a super easy job. So I'm really thankful for that. And right now I'm focusing on basically like getting out of the military, going through a lot of the final steps, the paperwork and everything.
Okay.
So really I'm focusing on that, but we just celebrated Easter last Sunday, and this Lent was actually a very difficult time because I still didn't have much idea of when I was going to be fully released from the military. It was just kind of I was stuck in this gray area, and I think that kind of affected my mental health because I do think it was an outside stressor because I didn't really change anything. You know, I was taking the same medication. I was doing the ketogenic diet, and I was stable for a long period of time. Then eventually it seemed like I just kind of started falling into a dark place. And I think it was more like the outside circumstances than my actual like personal, like chemical reasons or whatever. And for Lent, I was really struggling a lot and just kind of going into a dark place with a lot of like depression and anxiety.
Mm.
But thankfully, that actually drove me into a lot of prayer, which I guess is a really positive thing throughout the Lenten fast. You know, so that's kind of that's been what I've really been focusing on is like trying to I read a lot as well. So it's like I've just kind of been waiting to get out of the military, just going to work every day. And then when I get off of work, I try to read spiritual books every single day. Obviously, I try to follow my prayer rule. And then it's still difficult being in Japan because I can't always go to church every single week because my main church that I go to with my spiritual father, it's 6 hours away from me, and it's expensive to get there by the train, and a lot of times I have to get like a hotel, so it's hard for me to get there. And then when I can, I go to the Japanese Orthodox Church, and you know the whole liturgies in Japanese, but the priest speaks a little bit of English, so I'm able to confess to him, and then I'm able to commune, and
Okay.
that's really the most important thing, you know, is trying to participate in the life of the church. But honestly, I'm getting pretty excited to get out of Japan and go back home where I have access to an actual English speaking Orthodox
Yeah.
church, and so I can hopefully be surrounded by a community, actually attend church every single week, and try to live a more proper spiritual life, you know.
Do you know where you're going to be in America when you come back? Or
Yes, Montana.
oh, nice.
Yes.
Sounds like a. Oh, I remember I was telling you about that guy with the job.
Right, right.
But are you going to try to work, or are you going to be
Um,
what is the plan? Or are you going to be on disability or something? Or
yeah, so that's what I'm trying to figure out right now because I'm still going through the process of applying for disability through the VA.
okay,
So that's a pretty long process, but from what I do know, schizophrenia, it's classified as a severe illness, obviously. So I do think that I should be able to get some sort of disability compensation for that. But at the same time, I also I've thought about this. Now, I don't want to just like sit at home and just get my disability and not like do anything. And there are things that I could use that time to do, such as like focusing on my YouTube channel, my spiritual life, and all these things. But I do think it would be kind of beneficial for me to look for some form of employment to just keep me busy and making more income. So
right.
that's kind of what I'm trying to figure out.
Maybe work part time and still keep the disability,
Right.
like a certain number of hours. That might be a good thing to do.
Yes.
Um, Steven says, according to one of the most known Serbian monks, Father Arseni, demon of cannibals, I think he means cannabis,
I think so. Yeah.
can give you schizophrenia. And Gurn, I don't know how to say his name, but he says, I've experienced demonic activity in my subconscious after too much TAC. I'm convinced now there is a spiritual connection similar to hallucinogenic drugs, which is a whole nother topic. I never,
Definitely.
hallucinogenic drugs. Yeah. I mean, these monks who have, they have spiritual experiences and they like see the uncreated light and stuff, their spiritual eyes are opened after usually after many years of preparation and struggle in monasteries and stuff. Or you can just take a drug and have the experience, like no work required and you're not ready for it. So you're not prepared and well, it's going to give you problems. I'll just put it that way. It's going to cause a
Right.
problem for you. So I think for our channel, we're going to try to stay away from drugs. Kids, don't do drugs, with the exception of medical exemptions.
Right.
Okay, so we made it an hour here. I mean, are there any other topics you'd like to cover that we haven't? I mean, I think we've kind of covered things.
Um, I'm a pretty big reader, so I wanted to ask you, what spiritual Orthodox books have you found helpful with your mental illness?
Spiritual books for my mental illness. Oof. Well, I like to go the kind of books I like to read are like kind of heavy monastic literature,
Mm,
which I don't know is if it's necessarily recommend if you would I mean I don't know if that kind of I'm not a priest so I can't really recommend books I don't think but I don't know if that's
right, right,
recommended for though that kind of book is recommended for everybody.
right, right.
But I mean, Lives of Saints, you can't go wrong
Mm,
with Lives of Saints. I know people, if I show a book, they will read it. So I like the Ultimate Elders series, and
mm,
there are most of them are printed by Platina. They have like
okay.
Platina puts out like their series has like 10. This is my favorite, Elder Barsanufius of Optina.
Oh wow.
This is my favorite of the series.
Hmm.
And then there's a couple also printed by that there's a what's it by Holy Trinity Monastery. They've done a few of the Optina elders.
Mm,
So in total, there's like you could just run through like 14
wow.
Optina elders books. and I did a video on this a long time ago. I don't know if it was the most well put together, but I can solidly recommend to anybody just start reading the Obtune Elder series. Read the whole thing. Read all 14 of them. And you're gonna and these were these elders in I like, it was like there was this flowering of spirituality around this monastery and in Russia at
Mm,
the time. I think it was, 18th century and 19th into the 19th, and maybe I think it ended like the last Obtune elder died under persecution from the Soviets. But
right.
these elders had genuine, like, you can't question their genuine spiritual gifts. People would come to them and there was always a line, like there was always an elder, and there was always a line outside his cell of
Hmm.
lay people who were coming, lay people or priests, and a lot of people came to them. They want to go and ask the elder a question, a spiritual question, and for something that would happen on an everyday occurrence is that a person would finally get let in to see the elder, and they didn't even have to say anything. The elder
Right.
would answer their question and say, your name is, this is your name, and this is your problem, and this is what you need to do about it.
Hmm.
Like without the person opening their mouth. I mean, that was like an everyday occurrence because they were clairvoyant. They had
Right.
developed
Exactly.
through their struggles, their spiritual struggles, their purification, enlightenment, and it was like, so, these like, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, you can't contradict them. You can't like say no, that didn't happen. If you
Right.
say, and if you do, you're blaspheming the Holy Spirit. If you say that's not God, that's a demon.
Hmm.
That's Beelzebub. They're just Beelzebub. What can you say against like someone who's clairvoyant? If you say
Right.
the worst sin you can do, because it's, Christ says that the only sin that, is blasphemy against the Holy Spirit, right? He says
Right.
that only sin that's unforgivable, which is not unforgivable, because if you repent, you'll be
Hmm.
forgiven that sin. But he says that to underline the seriousness of it. If you
Right.
go blaspheme these elders and say you're just doing that by a demon, if you say that, that's a very serious sin. You shouldn't do that. So that's the explanation for that passage of scripture. But I can wholeheartedly recommend to everybody Lives of Saints.
Definitely. Definitely.
That's like, you can't go wrong reading Lives of Saints, and the Optian Elders are a great one. If you can get through all 14, I think there's 14 of them, you will
Mm.
be a more humble, pious Christian at the end of it.
Oh, definitely. I'm gonna have to check it out because I've never read the Optina Elders before.
Let's see. Did I miss any questions? So Tim Miller's got quite a few comments here. So I don't know what else. Did you hear voices? Is that a part of your experience?
Honestly, I think I may have experienced some audio hallucinations, but I'm still not even sure because I was like, this was during the time when I wasn't on medication yet. And looking back, it wasn't voices. It was like I was hearing like weird noises.
Hmm.
And looking back, I'm thinking like that didn't make sense. Like it sounded like things were like coming like out of the walls and stuff. And it just most likely it was some sort of hallucination just
Hmm.
because the nature of the illness. But
Right.
thankfully I've never had like horrible like hearing voices or like seeing things. You
Hmm.
know, I'm sure if I saw something that didn't exist, I wouldn't know because I would think it is real, but I
Right.
don't think that's happened to me. I think most of my psychosis has been a lot of like paranoia and like delusional thoughts,
All right.
which just like disconnected from reality. Where like going out in public, I feel like people are like following me or like something like they're gonna like attack me, and it's just like it's just not grounded in reality. And I think that might be also why they were like diagnosing me with anxiety because they were thinking like, oh, you're just like having like social anxiety. But it wasn't only that. It was like when I get on my phone sometimes, like I'll see like a social media post and I'll feel like it's like staring at me, you know? So it's like it's just like this unrealistic delusional paranoia, I guess would be
Hmm.
like the biggest symptom that I struggled with.
Really? I mean, I had all sorts of like crazy, like I had this whole delusional belief system that um built up, and that's a whole story in itself. Like I could probably do a whole podcast. It was kind of
Right.
wild. I don't know if I want to dig into it right now. Like, what did you? I mean, like, what are your like? Do you want to talk about that? Like, what was your delusion? What were your, you know,
Yeah,
what was
so
going on? What did you think was happening?
honestly, the first time that I experienced psychosis, I completely lost touch with reality. And it was like I believed like every single thing that was happening to me had a hidden meaning. It felt like everything was like connected in like this like delusional way. Like I was like watching TV and I felt like the TV was like talking to me, like telling me things. Like I remember here's a funny example. It's funny looking back at it now, but in the time it was terrifying. The first time that I had psychosis, they eventually, I long story, but I ended up in the emergency room. This was the first time I was put on antipsychotics, and I was watching the TV, and it was an episode of South Park, and it was this episode where like they were like killing somebody's parents and like feeding them to the person, and I was watching that. I was like, oh my god, somebody's going to kill my parents and feed them to me, and I was like 100% believing this is true. This is going to happen. Like it's so hard to explain to somebody that hasn't experienced it because they think like, oh, if you have like these delusional paranoid thoughts, like just snap out of it. Just tell yourself it's not real. But it's like in your like deepest core, you believe like this is legitimately happening. And I would be like going out in public and I would see like people looking at me and I would think that like Satan was like possessing them and they were like going to like I don't know if I thought they're gonna like kill me, but it was like everywhere I went, everything I saw, pictures, people, TV, it was like, oh my god, it's like sending me like Satan is like coming for me, and it was just like I don't know how to explain it other than it's a disconnection from reality that you can't snap out of
I,
unless you actually have treatment.
yeah, I can understand. I mean, that's easy. That I've been through it. I can
Right.
easily understand. Maybe someone who hasn't understood it, maybe they don't understand. Hard to picture it. But that's easy for me to put my head. Like to think like someone.
Right.
I thought I was, God. I thought I was maybe Jesus or something,
Oh,
or
really?
I thought I was going to rule the world.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, a lot of people think they're going to rule the world, though, but a lot of people want to rule the world. Everybody wants to rule the world.
Right.
At least, I don't know, young people. Um, Here's another super chat from Matthew Johnson. Thank you, $5. He says, "Glad to hear you're on to your next chapter, brother. Have you thought about a stay at a monastery for some healing before entering the real world?"
I have thought about that. I visited a monastery in the past when I was at home in the US. I went to Abbot Trefon's monastery in Washington, and that's actually I think that's the closest one to my house in Montana. I'm not sure if there are any that are closer than that, but definitely, like I said, I have a lot of things that I have to take care of as far as looking for employment, trying to get the military disability, and trying to just figure out a lot of things for my future.
And you're
And
married too, right?
yes, I am, and that's one of the big things that I'm trying to figure out right now is the immigration process because
Mhm.
my wife is Japanese, and right now it's looking like there might be a possibility that the visa process could take quite a while to get approved. So I'm trying to figure out there are some programs that for active duty military it can be expedited, but I still I don't know my exact date that I'm going to exit the military, but it could be coming up very soon. So I don't know if I'm going to be going back to the United States with my wife or if I'm going to be going back by myself for a while waiting for her visa to get approved before she can join me. So I have definitely considered going to a monastery, trying to find a monastery that might take me for like a couple weeks or something if they have availability, and just trying to just live a peaceful God-centered life for a while before I really jump back into the world as a civilian and try to like really figure everything out.
Yeah. I will say so. Have you read John Nash, the biography of John Nash? Beautiful.
John Nash. I've seen the movie, but I haven't read the book.
The movie doesn't really. I mean, the book is amazing book, really
Oh,
well
really?
written, very fascinating, very interesting about this. I mean, you're just learning a lot about that time period. But uh, one thing about his life was that he discovered that it's good to have a kind of a quiet life, low stress, routine, nothing wild going on is very helpful was very helpful for him in his schizophrenia and recovery. And he eventually recovered without medication, actually, which is a different. What the real story is a little different in the book in the movie. They say he makes this speech at the end about how great the medications are, and I think that uh, I think that the pharmaceutical industry might have, had something to do with that,
Oh, I'm
like
sure.
making it an advertisement in a movie, because the truth is he recovered without medication,
Wow.
and I mean, and he started to do math again, uh, like it was just, it's possible. It was really late in his life, though. I mean, it took many years, but he recovered his lucidity after
Right.
a while. So, I would highly recommend that book too,
Oh, definitely.
if you have time to read it. Um, but like, yeah, go. There is a monastery in Montana, but it's empty.
Right, right. It's not open yet.
We need, we need, we got all of these young men, joining the church, and most of them are single. Some of these guys need to step up and like go populate an empty monastery. Like just go
Right.
do it. I mean, I'm a big proponent of monasticism. I love monasticism myself. I wanted to be a monk at one period of time, and I sort of think I am in some ways. Um, I'm on the internet too much for being a monk, but
Me too.
I'm trying to provide a service here. So, shout out to Thaddeus in the chat. Thank you for watching, brother. He's always so kind. Um, he says everyone should be a monk.
Right. One of my favorite quotes is St. John Chrysostom. He said, the only difference between a monk and a married person is that one is married. So basically, we're all called to a life of asceticism and prayer. And, it made me think, like, wow, I definitely fall short. If that's the only difference and we're all called to this, to such spiritual heights, then
Right.
we don't have excuses even living in the world, even if we're not monks, we still, we have the same goal of salvation. So
Right. The same goal and the same gospel commandments.
yes,
Although Christ says, if you will be perfect, go and sell everything you have and give,
yes,
and give to the poor and follow me, which is hard for a married person to do.
definitely.
But not everybody, I don't think that commandment is for everybody, only if you're really serious.
Right.
Um, So, all right. I mean, why don't you just let us know where people can find you? I linked your YouTube channel in the description below, and any last thoughts, final message for the audience.
Yeah, so you guys can just follow that link and find my YouTube channel. I'm like I said earlier, I'm still trying to figure out exactly what direction I'm trying to go with it, but I want to combine some form of mental health and physical weightlifting and nutrition sort of coaching into something there. So if I can ask you guys, the viewers, if you guys have any suggestions for content you would like to see from me, that's really the biggest thing I'm trying to figure out right now, because I have the time to make the videos, but I don't really know what exactly people are looking for, what would be beneficial. And I can only come up with so much myself, so having the input from other viewers. And if you guys would go check out my channel, if you like what you see, please subscribe and let me know.
Yeah, just
And
go subscribe. I mean, it doesn't cost you anything. You just click, and 2 clicks, you're there, and give it, let's get him a boost here, whoever's watching.
I appreciate it. I didn't want to ask them to subscribe if they don't like the content, but
Well, come
obviously
on.
everything helps.
Yeah, why not? I mean, it's not like, I mean, maybe you get a few suggestions, but I mean, it doesn't hurt. I try to just follow. Actually, it got to be so many. I before I would just any Orthodox YouTuber, I would just subscribe. Everybody. And now there are so
Mhm.
many. It's like there's hundreds. Which is
Right.
good. Everybody has their own audience, and I think you don't have to be a huge channel. You don't have to have tens of thousands of subscribers, because it's the individual, like, one-to-one connections, people asking questions, getting their questions, like someone reached out to me and said, how do I get baptized? And he had never
Mhm.
been to a church. And I said, well, where do you live? Here's a church. Go visit a church. Go to a liturgy. That kind of one-to-one help. And that's why you need people manning the station with YouTube channels, and so that someone is watching and they have a question, they can get their question answered, and it can help them. We can help shepherd people into the church.
Right, definitely.
All right, so I thank you. This has worked out. This has been a good episode, and I thank you for your time, sir.
Yeah, thank you for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and I'll be in touch with you. We'll stay in touch, and so that's the stream for the night. Thank you, everybody, for watching. The people who sent the super chats and comments, and we'll catch you all next time. Ta ta.